Hey everybody, this is Adrian, and I'm going to show you Service Worker, just some very basic Service Worker stuff to give you a sense of what Service Worker does. So I've got an incognito window here in Google Chrome. Let me turn on the DevTools, and I'm going to go to the network pane to record the network traffic and make sure this guy's red, so it's recording. I'm going to go to a page on soundslice.com, my music education site. This page uses a service worker, so let's see what actually happens. So I'll load the page, and since this is an incognito window, it's got a cold cache and no service worker running yet. So every network request is hitting the network as intended. So you got the original page, and then you've got all the assets that it is calling out to. So you've got some CSS, JavaScript, images, fonts, and a couple of JSON files that it does AJAX requests for. That's actually the notation data for this page. So you've got all that stuff, and it all hit the network. Now, one of the requests here was for serviceworker.js. What on earth is that? So let's answer that by doing a quick view source. And near the bottom of my page is this little bit of code. It says, if there's a service worker available, if the browser supports it, register this service worker, and it's at /serviceworker.js. So if I go to soundslice.com/serviceworker.js, I get the source code for the service worker. And this is very simple conceptually. All it does is it acts as a middleman between your web page, between my web page and the network. And it has the ability to intercept any outbound network request. So for instance, for all these CSS files and fonts and JavaScript files, it says it gets the opportunity to do something special or out of the ordinary rather than hitting the network for every single one of them, any file that's controlled by this page. And just quickly to look at this code, what it does here is it runs a regex on the URL. So the URL is whatever the URL of the CSS or the font or the JavaScript is. It runs a regex on it, and it's an asset in the format that I use on the site. If that URL matched the regex, then it's going to search the cache by doing this caches.match, and if it finds a response, then it's going to return it. Otherwise, it's going to fetch the request, and then when it gets something, put it in the cache, so next time it's not going to have to hit the network. And here on this part of the code, it does the same thing just for those JSON files because they're structured a little bit differently in terms of the URLs. So that's the service worker. The first time we loaded this page, nothing happened because there was no service worker yet. Hence, everything hit the network. Now, if I reload the page, the service worker is going to do its magic. So let me reload. And now I see a lot of different stuff here. Several of the requests have this from service worker. What that means is it didn't hit the network for this thing, the CSS file. It was cached by the service worker, and the service worker returned the thing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the same exact thing as if you had hit the network. It's whatever the service worker wanted to do to handle that request, which is a subtle distinction. So a couple of these hit the cache, but they have this little circle icon next to them. What I've gathered is that means it was handled by the service worker, and now it's going to be in the cache for next time around. And these fonts got served by service worker. They also got served by the cache. Some weird stuff is going on. Why do we have all this weird, some stuff from cache, some stuff from service worker, and some stuff still hit the network, like these files still hit the network? I think that'll make itself clear if we do a second page refresh. So what we're seeing here is a weird intermediary state of the page where some of the stuff had already been seen by the service worker the first time around, and it got cached just due to the order in which the stuff was loaded. So maybe the service worker got loaded before a couple of the assets did, so it got to load some of them, and maybe it came after some of the other ones, so it didn't get cached. So if we reload a second time, it'll actually be like the intended behavior, and in fact it is. So we've got the original page, and then every asset is coming from service worker. There's a couple of exceptions. Google Analytics, I decided not to put in service worker, and this metronome.oga, which I just haven't gotten around to implementing in the service worker cache yet. But everything else comes from the service worker, which means, look at these load times. It's super, super fast, 3 milliseconds, 4 or 5 milliseconds. It doesn't have to hit the network. It's super, super fast. And another benefit of that is that you have basically the infrastructure for offline mode for your web pages. So it's not working for this particular example because the original HTML file is not cached in Service Worker. It still needs the network. But basically everything else does not need the network. So if and when I implement some sort of Service Worker caching for this original file, then if I turn off my Wi-Fi, it will still work if I reload the page, and that's kind of awesome. So I just have 2 more things to show you. One is there's an error in the console. It did a request to serviceworker.js and it got an error file exists. Every time you load a page, if it has that serviceworker.register in it, it's going to do a request and grab the service worker. In my case here, I haven't made any changes to it since the last time we loaded, so nothing's changed with the service worker. It's just going to continue having the same logic. But there's a current bug in Chrome where if that exact situation happens, you get a file exists error. That's safe to ignore. That freaked me out when I first saw it, but it's just a bug in Chrome. This is the bleeding edge stuff, guys. And then the second thing is that some of these requests are read. Why is that? That took me a while to figure out too. It's because what that means is it's a service worker fallback. You can see if you hover over here. And that means the service worker it looked at that URL and it intercepted it and it tried to do something, but it decided not to do anything with it. So it just is falling back to the normal browser behavior, which is just load the file from the network. And the same thing happened here for audio.mp3. I don't have any handling or caching of that particular file in the service worker yet, but it's still being handled by the service worker because it's an asset that this particular page is trying to get. So it still goes through the service worker, it just wasn't handled by it, so it falls back to the normal browser behavior. All right, I hope this gives you a good idea of what Service Worker can do. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the stuff that service workers can do. This is the very bare bones basic stuff.